Christians in America.
The Constitution says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Do you know, folks, up until President Trump did it, speaking at the NRA's National Convention, Ronald Reagan was the last sitting president to do so, to talk at those annual meetings. Pretty cool. The Democrats are brilliant when it comes to marketing, by the way. I'm talking about guns, as they push to repeal the Second Amendment and destroy the NRA. They use words that are aimed at hiding the truth. I'm going to spell some of these out for you, and I want you to watch as you watch the news. Notice you rarely hear them say gun control anymore. Now, anti-gun leftists opt for terms like gun safety. Well, who's against gun safety, right? We all want gun safety. The problem is there's nothing safe about their gun safety measures. Overreaching bans and rules specifically designed to either take away your gun or make it nearly impossible to buy and use one. Often they add common sense to the phrase. The conversation, common sense gun safety laws, right? But don't be fooled by that. The high-paid Bloomberg PR flacks that come up with this smoke and mirrors trick are using words to dupe the uninformed. No one with common sense thinks criminals are going to register their guns, much less turn them in if they're outlawed. The common sense assessment of the left's latest gun control push has them making criminals out of law-abiding citizens. Here's another term. I know you hear this all the time. Assault weapons. I hate it. It's another term they throw around because it instantly paints a negative picture of the most popular rifle in America, the AR-15. Joe Biden can be heard calling them military-style weapons. That's a word game, too. The common AR-15 is not a fully automatic machine gun. The left wants you to think it is. They want you to think they're bad and scary. The AR-15 pales in comparison to the modern military M4 or M16. So don't be fooled by what can only be described as an anti-gun propaganda word game. That's a primer for what is now heating up in Congress. The Democrats have introduced the most radical gun control plan I have ever seen. Of course, it's filled with the usual gun bans, magazine bans, registration requirements, all gun owners being put on a federal list. Even an antique gun displayed at your home would have to be registered, according to this bill. But there are some other proposals in this massive bill you may not have heard about if passed. It would be mandatory for all gun owners to carry insurance. That's right, insure yourselves in case something bad were to happen. Gun owners would be forced to go through a psychological evaluation. Investigators could interview your relatives, your associates, even an ex-spouse. And when it comes to that magazine ban, if you're caught violating it, you could face a $25,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison. This for exercising your constitutional right. All of this, of course, starts with a war on the NRA. Get through the NRA, take out the Second Amendment. That's their game plan. Well, I want to welcome now a good friend of the program, Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina and NRA board member Mark Robinson. Also with us, a good friend of mine, Second Vice President for the NRA and Chairman of the NRA Outreach Committee, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Willis Lee. Governor, Colonel, great to have you both on the program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks for having me, Brand. And prayers to you all.
Absolutely, guys.
Freeze right now. The NRA is the most inclusive civil rights organization ever, anywhere. That's because we're focused on the Second Amendment, not race, not color, not even ideology. And this move you've talked about all week, where we'll be able to reincorporate out of a tyrannical state of New York to a freedom-loving Texas, it enables us to provide even more of NRA's best in the business training, firearm safety, and programs across all demographics, including any of the identities the left can invent.
Yeah. It is very true. When we talk about the war on the NRA, they know in order to get a bill like this through, they've got to try to debilitate the NRA. Mark Robinson, you've watched the NRA be attacked for years and years and years, but one of the secrets now is that there is a changing face of the NRA. You've got more minorities, you've got more women than ever before, younger people too joining the NRA. Mark Robinson, what do you tell the leftists out there gunning for the NRA and our rights?
The very first thing I would say is this. You mentioned it in the opening, something the left likes to talk about. Common sense gun control legislation, common sense gun laws. The greatest piece of common sense gun legislation or greatest common sense piece of gun law that was ever written is the Second Amendment of our Constitution. That is what we need to be following. That is what we need to be upholding. We see what has happened to nations who do not allow their citizens to remain armed and fall under the rule of tyrannical governments. We have seen it throughout the 20th century. We have watched the mass graves be filled. We have watched people be thrown into prison. We've watched it. It's all recorded in history. We know how this story ends. So those folks on the left that are trying to take away our gun rights, I can say these two things. We're not going to let it happen without a fight. And number two, we're just simply not going to comply when you're trying to take away our constitutional rights. That is absolute no.
Yeah, I saw a T-shirt on Instagram the other day. It said, "You outlaw guns, you make me an outlaw." I guess in some respects, they're probably true. Colonel, when you look at the NRA and the situation it's been going through, what do you tell members, and what do you tell members specifically to push back against these overreaching laws?
Well, Grant, thanks. I appreciate that question because we get a lot of that. We're watching multiple attacks against the NRA, which just gives an indication of how afraid they are of us. And I'll use some of those words the Democrats tend to use and the liberals want to throw around. Part of this is the Democrats' racist class warfare against the people who are most needy and need the protection. We shouldn't have to pay for a civil right. My neighborhood can't afford 7,000 National Guard troops protecting us. None of my friends have a Secret Service detail protecting them. Common sense, you want common sense, you should be able to defend yourself against a murderer or a rapist. You should be able to protect your family when an armed burglar comes into your home. You are your first responder, regardless of whether the Democrats want to defund the police or not.
Yeah, it's so true. Mark Robinson, I want to ask you, you became Lieutenant Governor of the great state of North Carolina. Your video went viral speaking up for gun rights. You are proof, and I'd like to get you to give a message to everybody out there that wants to change government. You are proof that the everyday guy can do it and ultimately become Lieutenant Governor in the United States of America.
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, my story could only happen in America. This is the only nation where my story could happen. And when we're talking about these gun laws, what we need to remind people first off is this. In order for us to push back against these folks that are attempting to take away our constitutional rights, we have to band together. We have to get politically active. We have to get politically motivated. We have to join groups like the NRA that's going to continue to fight for our gun rights. And then we have to understand what's actually going on. Willis mentioned this tax they're talking about placing on AR-15s, a $200 tax on each rifle and a $200 tax on each magazine. Who is it that can afford those things? It's the Joe Bidens of the world that can afford those things. The man who's living in the inner city surrounded by gangs, he can't afford that. And besides that, right, my major issue with all of those things is this. It is a direct violation of the spirit of the 24th Amendment. It's almost like they're placing a tax on a constitutional right. And that is an absolute no-go. So, we're urging folks out there to stand up and push back against this.
Yeah. Governor, I'll tell you, there's no almost about it. That's exactly what they are trying to do. Since when do we tax your right? And it's a shame. Mark Robinson, Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, thank you. Colonel Willis Lee, I appreciate you coming on the program as always. Thank you both for what you do for gun owners and gun rights in America. We'll talk again soon, guys. Still ahead on Stinchfield.